Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about something really important. We've kind of started touching on stress with vagal tone and how to keep you calm. What I really want to talk about today is the role of cortisol in stress. So some of you may have heard of this hormone called cortisol. It's a really critical hormone in terms of our general health. I want to explain to you why that is and what it actually does. We're going to talk about that in more detail in upcoming weeks. So one of the key things with cortisol is a stress hormone. But when we start thinking about stress, we think of flight or fight and we think of adrenaline. So how does this cortisol fit in? And it is just as important, especially if you're trying to recover from injury or you have any kind of illness. So first we need to understand is that stress really is all about our flight or fright systems. Yeah, it's all about that response to stress. It's that immediate response to try and survive the situation that you're actually in. And that whole mechanism is really designed to protect us. It's designed to keep us safe when we're under attack and give us that instant ability to switch on and get away from whatever it is that seems to be attacking us or threatening our life. And this system, which is called our sympathetic nervous system, really is dependent upon the hormones adrenaline, which are also in other areas of the world known as epinephrine. And this is also what helps control your immune system to an extent. If you know of, if you've seen anyone with those pens, this is really what we're talking about, epinephrine or adrenaline. And it's one of the ways the system can calm down immune responses as well, is to release that adrenaline, that sympathetic flight. Which is sometimes why we see people crave things that they're mildly reacting to. So the way this basically works is when you first get a stress reaction, we have one nerve that's coming in here. So this is our sympathetics, our flight or fight, and the signal's coming down this nerve heading towards the next nerve. As it comes across, eventually it hits a gap where the two nerves need to join. And this is what we call a synapse. Okay, this is what we call a synapse. Oops, my TV's gone a little bit funny there, but it's called a synapse. S-Y-N-A-P-S-E, synapse. And what basically should happen is, as it hits the synapse, this electrical signal converts into a chemical signal, and these chemicals are released from the first nerve, get to move across the synapse in towards the second nerve, where they're actually picked up by receptors on that nerve. So when these little particles that are moving across, in this case adrenaline, hit these receptors, it initiates the response, which then fires off this nerve and keeps that reaction going. And this is the basic, a very simple approach to the basics how nerves generally fire when we're communicating from one side to the next. So how does cortisol fit in? So cortisol is a pretty interesting hormone with the way that it works. So one of the things that it's basically enhances that reaction. So it's like a catalyst. So if you can imagine if we had ice and we're trying to convert ice back to water, we could leave it out on the bench, but really how fast that occurs will be dependent upon how much heat is being put on it. So that heat doesn't have anything to do with the reaction, but the heat basically speeds the reaction up. And this is what we're talking about with cortisol. What we're really talking about is enhancing the receptors, in other words, enhancing the response. So the more wound up or the more geared up or fired up these receptors are, the more receptive they are to the adrenaline moving across, and therefore the quicker or the more enhanced the response becomes on the other side of the nerve. So the big key thing that cortisol does is it actually ramps up these receptors, it sensitizes them, if you will, to allow for an increased sensitivity to adrenaline and therefore a bigger reaction. So why would we want to do that? So the main reason we want to do this is this system, this flight or fight response and adrenaline actually takes a fair bit of energy to fire up and get moving and get operational. So if we can sensitize the receptors, what it will basically mean is we need less adrenaline to maintain that same level of reaction. And if you've ever seen anyone with anxiety, this is really what we're talking about. Where we have, if you're having a really good day, you might hear one little bad news and it's not a problem. Where if you're having a really bad day, that one bit of bad news may fire you right off. Okay, so this is a sensitization thing, not directly related to cortisol, but just to give you an analogy or an example. It's the same thing. So the reason we have this is if we make this second nerve more sensitive to cortisol, we don't need to use as much adrenaline ongoing to get the same result. So this allows us to have a long-term stress response that's going. So why is this potentially a bad thing? Well, the big problem with it is cortisol doesn't just have an effect here. Cortisol basically affects every single part of your system, every single cell in the human body. So it'll affect your brain health. So we know that people with elevated levels of cortisol for a long period of time tend to have shrinking of an area of the brain called your hippocampus. And this is the area that's responsible for your short-term memory, for your spatial awareness, so you don't bump into things when you're walking by them. It looks after your visual memory, so things like where did I leave my keys, even your navigation skills, like how to read a map. Walking into a shopping centre and getting lost and not knowing where the exit is or where you parked your car. This is all hippocampal function. These are things that are often damaged by cortisol. The immune system is affected by it. So some parts of the immune system are enhanced, some parts are suppressed. Certain areas will become overactive and this can lead to autoimmune diseases. Other areas are underactive and this can lead to things like upper respiratory problems, infections, things like this. Our thyroid is affected by it. So across the board, our sensitivity and metabolic rate can slow down and get altered with it. Our blood sugars are changed with it as well, which can predispose people to type 2 diabetes, cause them to put on weight. There's a whole myriad of different areas that are affected by cortisol. So the real problem with this is the initiation of our flight or fight response to begin with, our stress reaction. So this is what we need to actually control. So there's a ton of different ways that you can help regulate your own cortisol levels and bring this down. Of course, modulating your stress is the best way to do it, and we're going to talk about a little bit more of this in the upcoming weeks. So if you have any questions for now on cortisol and you want more information on it, or you want to know if this is you or any of those symptoms you spoke about seem to relate to you, then just send me a message. I'm always happy to help out in any way, shape or form that I can. Otherwise, remember, it's all about adding life to your years, guys, and we'll catch up with you in the next vid. See you guys. Bye for now.